Hi there. The stay-at-home order has been particularly challenging for parents who do so from two different households. They have, of course, court-ordered co-parenting plans and safety issues to navigate. Co-parenting coach Karen Bonnell joins me.
What are you hearing from your parents who are co-parenting?
A lot of fear. It started out with, should we shelter the children in place? Do we share them across households? What if my co-parent, I don't think is reliable to follow the mandates and processes and procedures? And so initially there was just tremendous confusion and worry and concern, as you can imagine, and we're talking about people's children, right? And now as it's gone on and on, we're finding parents are actually just wearing thin. They've kind of found their way through being able to share their kids across both households and how to make sure that they're following the mandates and practices and protocols, but they're wearing thin. They're trying to work full time, or they've got money stress or even food stress and kids home all the time. It's really tough, Margaret. It's just a tough time.
Takes an awful lot of patience and a willingness to really, step one foot at a time every day. How are they negotiating, in your cases, the couples you're working with, making sure that the guidelines are the same in each household and for everybody who's in that household?
Right? Exactly. So, I encourage parents to sit down and have a very frank conversation about, what are the governor's mandates, and that we're going to follow those. It's not a subjective personal experience. I'm dating someone who lives down the street, and so I'm in and out of that person's household, and they have children who go to a co-parent who lives further down the street, and on and on and on, right? The chain of events. And so we really try to talk about, how do we contain this right here, right now? You're the parents. Everybody in your two households are following the guidelines. We talk that through. So we talk about quarantine families, right? So that it could be across two households. Maybe there's a grandparent who's also following all of the guidelines, and that grandparent's household gets included, so it's three households. But the key is communication. And the key is, as you pointed out, patience. And then how do we together realize we're in this together? We have to be able to work together, take good care of the children, and get through this as best we can.
And it wasn't always easy before this, and now we have all this extra stress. So if a co-parenting couple wasn't completely amicable before this, what's your advice to them about getting on the same page when lives are at stake?
Exactly. Well, here's an interesting thing. You never know when lightning's going to strike. And for some of those co-parent couples that used to fight over organic broccoli and goldfish crackers, as if somehow that was monumental, they've really stepped up. They're like, hey, we're not messing around. We've got some serious business here to do, and we're on it, right? So there's some of my co-parents who were struggling about things that I wish they could have known were immaterial before. They do now know that was immaterial. And they have really pulled together. For others, especially if the co-parents of my first responders, they're really struggling. And so it's a lot of reassurance. It's a lot of making sure adequate information gets communicated across households about what we're doing. If you're a firefighter, a police officer who's on the front lines, you're an emergency room physician, you're really talking with your co-parent about exactly what you're doing to keep those children and your household safe. It's as good as it
let's
gets.
talk about emotions as well for children. Where everybody's going through stress, even if things are fairly ideal in your household for the time.
Right.
But we know that isn't always the case. Talk to us about how we explain what's going on with our kids, how we manage their emotions in general.
Right. Exactly. Well, in terms of explaining what's going on, it's a little bit in terms of developmental, what is a child ready to understand? But the one thing that they can know is that there's a sickness going around that for some people is very, very scary and causes very serious illness. And so all of us, every single one of us, is doing what we can to make sure that we don't inadvertently, accidentally spread that illness. Okay, so there's your most simple explanation about what is a pandemic and why does everybody have to do this, right? Nobody's sick in our family, that's true. But we would never want to accidentally make someone sick and not know that we could. Okay, so that's that. And then you and I both know, as does everybody listening to this, this is so counter to what children need. They need to be outside playing in the playground. They need to be with their peers. I will tell you, I was walking down the street in my neighborhood and 3 carloads of teenage boys were packing into these 3 cars. And I realized they had come off of the basketball court that had been completely taped off with caution tape by the city, of course, right? Because it's closed. And you know those boys went right over that caution tape to play ball. And I thought, that's how badly, when you're a teenage boy or a teenager, that you need your peers. It's like everything in them says, this is what's normal, right? So it's a very, very tricky time about how we talk to our kids, how we explain the need for safety, how we help them understand why do they feel so crummy. They miss their teachers. What about the grief? Our 3rd graders, is like, is my teacher okay? What about my friends? I just want to be on the playground.
Thank you, Karen. More New Day after this.